Awesome. Thank you, Courtney, and thank you all for being here. As you mentioned, thanks for that kind introduction as well. So let's get started here. As was mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about fueling our body and just unlocking some of the secrets of shopping and planning our meals. As was mentioned, I'm Meghan Windham. I'm a registered and licensed dietitian. I work here on campus in the Department of Nutrition as a faculty member. I am a clinical assistant professor and also director of our didactic program for undergrad students wanting to become registered dietitians. So have a really exciting role with our students, but I do always love helping out with our wellness events and initiatives. So thanks for having me here today. This presentation will be fairly interactive, so please feel free to type in the chat as we go throughout. And at the end, I should have some time for question and answer as well. So hop along here and let's get started. So I first want you to just challenge yourself to think about what influences our food choices. I'm going to put up a few things here on the next slide because many of you may relate to certain areas. I know for some of us it's cost or convenience. Other, it's really just I eat what I like and what tastes good. And then for some, it really might be based on a disease state or disease condition. It could be we're influenced by others in our society or social media. And then it could just be time and culture. So many of us eat differently for different reasons, but today we'll dive into that. And as we think about what choices that we're making at the store, I would challenge you to think about this. Is it taste? Is it a disease condition? Is it truly just being influenced by others? And I'm trying to understand what that might look like for you. Um, I get this question a lot. I want to eat healthy, but it's hard for me to, especially on a budget. And I would even say most of us are on a budget these days with the cost of things increasing and prices of foods. I feel like we have a harder time with this. So I'd just like to open it up and challenge us to think amongst ourselves or type in the chat, what are some barriers to eating healthy on a budget? What do you find is a struggle for you or your family or friends that might find it challenging to eat healthy with limited resources? Okay, great. So variety, time, I think time is a big factor here for sure. Convenience plays a part in that. Great. So I think we as we think about this, I would really help us to dive into what are those things that we personally struggle with. Finding choices for the whole family. I think that's what I struggle with too. It's like it sounds great to me, but it might not be the best choice for kids who are a lot younger. So this is great. Good feedback here. This is going to be the overview of our presentation is really understanding how we build a healthy plate. And my plate is a really good example of that. Half of our plate being fruits and or vegetables, a fourth of our grains being, or a fourth of our plate being grains. And the saying here is make half of our grains whole grains. So even though we might not eat brown rice or wheat pasta or wheat bread all the time, if we can make half of those whole grains, that's a step in the right direction. Certainly, then moving on to our proteins and a fourth of our plate being proteins, and then including our low fat dairy as well. So, we'll talk about each section here today and kind of go along through the grocery store tour and get some ideas of what we're choosing. My challenge to you today is to think about why am I choosing what I'm choosing? And it might be time, it might be convenience, it might be taste, but hopefully at the end today, you have a better perspective on why am I choosing that? And is that the best choice, or could I do a little bit better? Okay. In conjunction with that, plate portions are key. And this is just a guide and a disclaimer to say that not everyone's going to have the same portion, but portions can be distorted pretty quickly and pretty easily, especially among those who might not understand what a normal portion is. So I use this slide here for reference. Certainly, I will make the slides available. And if they're not already, that way you can take note of that too. So let's dive into the grocery store. You know, previously in my previous role before coming to faculty at A&M, I did a lot of grocery store tours with students, and I loved that part in the hands-on education and environment. So we're taking it a little bit virtually here, so bear with me, but please feel free to ask questions, and I'll keep checking the chat here as we go throughout. So just an overview of how do we start in the store. Food labels can be really overwhelming, but they can be a wealth of science-backed information. I think so often we turn to social media, which isn't always a bad thing, but we turn to sources that might not have the most credible information. And then we're grasping at what's the best thing to choose. And when we look at the front of a package, it can be very confusing and it can be very enticing and it can be overwhelming. So my rule of thumb here is if we are confused by the packaging or we're confused by the wording, to always go to the nutrition facts panel because this is where that credible information is going to lie in what's truly in the product. Um, if we do nothing else, I would say go to the right-hand side of where these percentages are. So here in the red box, and a rule of thumb is 20% or higher means it's high in that nutrient or that ingredient or that vitamin or mineral. And then 5% or less means it's low end. So if it's around 5, 6%, it means it's not a great source of potassium or it's not really high in sodium. It's about 7%. And this really helps us because many consumers are confused with grams and micrograms and milligrams, and we don't measure in that, but our food labels are listed in that. So if nothing else, try to steer to the right-hand side, look at those percentages as a way to say, you know what, I'm trying to find something that's a little lower in sodium, or I need something a little bit higher in vitamin D based on a health concern. And how do we look for that? So this is really something that we can look for. Ingredient list is another thing. So I'll point out several examples here today in the presentation, but ingredients, even though we might not understand all of them, it's a good way to figure out what's all in here to help us make a better informed choice. Okay, so let's first start out produce. So we're going to walk through the store and go through the produce section here. What are some things you look for or maybe are confused by in the produce section? And we'll highlight some of those. So feel free to type in the chat here if you have some confusing areas or maybe just, hey, I always buy this or I like to look for, and you name it. Okay, organic, perfect. High starch foods, organic, sugar content, how to cook it. Yeah, there's a lot of fruits and vegetables here that sometimes we don't know what to do with them. Back to the convenience topic too, you can see here there's convenience items and then there's a picture of just the raw items. And I think in the produce section, we're seeing a lot more of these convenience prepackaged items. And in season was mentioned here too, Molly. Thanks for that. So let's dive into produce and give a little bit more feedback. Um, Here's just a little myth or fact to get us started. Are sweet potatoes better than russet potatoes or our white potatoes? What do you think about this here? Myth or fact? Sweet potatoes better than russet? Myth, fact? I'm getting a little mixed reviews here. Fact, 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 depends. Good feedback. So this is a mixed bag here of what you're thinking. So let's dispel the myth here and sort through it. So this is actually a myth. We often think that sweet potatoes are the best potato to choose, and those are the ones we need to choose. How it's prepared does matter, yes. So thanks for sharing that as well. But let's dive down to here again. What would be on a label? That's hard thing in the produce section because there are no real food labels listed on them, and it's hard to understand sometimes. So as we dispel this here, the calories are very similar. They're both good sources of potassium, both good sources of nutrients. So they're really both great choices. It's really what we add to it sometimes, and that was mentioned in a comment that impacts the nutritional value. So if white potatoes and we're frying them or adding a lot of various toppings to them, that could impact the nutritional content. But at the end of the day, white potatoes are just as good and just as healthy as sweet potatoes. So this is just a point to understand. Sometimes we get a lot of confusion in these areas and we hear terms or we hear someone say sweet potatoes are the best. And yes, while they have good nutrients, so do white potatoes. So don't feel guilty or bad about choosing those, especially if they're baked or oven roasted. White potatoes, great sources of a lot of nutrients. Okay, What about bananas? I get a lot of comments and questions about bananas being high in sugar or not good for us. So is this a myth or fact? Bananas are not good for you. Few myths here. Okay. Yes, so I would agree with you on this as well. Bananas are a really good source of potassium. Many people know that, and they help regulate our electrolyte levels, and particularly for blood pressure. Good sources of nutrients and micronutrients here. I would argue the just portability, the convenience, the cost, the family friendly, kid friendly, really good nutrients here as well. Someone mentioned green better than ripe. So the green or the less ripened bananas will have a little bit less of that sugar or starch that's turned into sugar in them. So if we're watching blood sugar control or being mindful of that, certainly we could look at that too. So bananas, very economical, very budget friendly. This was mentioned here too. Bananas have this fiber called pectin, which helps with blood sugar levels. So don't be afraid of bananas. They are fine to choose. Right. One more here. So romaine lettuce has more nutrients than iceberg lettuce. What are our thoughts here? Does romaine lettuce have more nutrients than iceberg? Fact. A few of you are saying fact here, some myth, uncertain. Let's dive into this one here. So this is actually a fact. Your romaine lettuce has that deeper, richer color, which gives us a better and excellent source of vitamin A and K, whereas iceberg is more of a good source. Good meaning less percent of our daily value, excellent is much higher. So here again, good nutrients in both, but we're going to get excellent sources in that romaine or deeper, darker color. The toppings still count just like potatoes would as well, but those deeper, richer colors do help when we look at produce or in that section. Okay, so in general, wrapping up produce, buy in season. So these are usually more budget friendly options. They are usually picked at peak ripeness, so there's more nutrients there. When things aren't in season, I would encourage you to buy them frozen. Many people are turned off by frozen or feel like it's not a good option, but in fact, our frozen produce is picked at peak ripeness and then flash frozen. So a lot of the nutrients are retained there, as opposed to if we bought it fresh and it's not in season, it might have been picked too early and ripened in different ways. So we're not getting the maximum nutrients. So frozen is just as healthy as our fresh. Organic was mentioned too. Just keep in mind, organic is the growing condition. So organic doesn't mean healthier. That's a common misconception too, is that we have to buy organic because it's healthier or more nutritious. It's not more nutritious and it's not necessarily healthier. It's really a growing condition and how it's produced, not necessarily a nutritional value difference. Okay. If we're looking at budget friendly, I would certainly say chopping the whole fruits ourselves. So buying the individual cartons that are already chopped and washed and prepared do cost more. So something to consider there. And then we're going to dive into canned fruit, because this is another misconception that many people think that I shouldn't buy canned or it's not good for me. But good choices here that we can look at. Okay, so diving into canned, I have highlighted different types of canned pears. And when we look for canned pears on the left-hand side here in 100% juice, you will see that there's no added sugar to 100% juice items, and there's naturally sugar in there. This is something that I think the produce section does a great job of displaying items, but if we truly saw a label on a pear, you would see 10 to 15 grams of sugar in that pear because that's just naturally there. So with canned items, I think people get sticker shock and go, oh my goodness, 10 grams of sugar, this is too much. When in reality, that's just the natural sugar from the fruit. But when we get in light syrup, heavy syrup, or even some of these added syrups, you can see how the sugar values can climb. So just something to point out here, if we're gonna buy canned, great choice. It's shelf stable, it's easy to portable and easy to move around. However, you are going to see a sugar content on there just as you would a label in the store. Just try to buy 100% juice to minimize the added sugar. Fiber in canned fruits, do we lose that when the skin is removed? Great question, Monica. Yes, so many of our fruits don't have that skin on, like pears, for example, or applesauce. So yes, you might lose that fiber. That's why eating the whole fruit is best. However, if the option, especially I would say even like for my kids, they like the canned oranges in 100% juice that don't have that film around the edge. Certainly the film is great source of fiber, good nutrients, but they're not going to eat it if they have to have that film around it. So canned is a great option for them. It's kind of meeting them in the middle and seeing what's best for them. But that's an excellent point there, Monica. Okay, another just slide to help with eating more fruits and vegetables in particular, great ways that we can add them to foods that we might already eat, buying fresh when they're in season, and then possibly are frozen when it's not in season. Here again, adding them to pre-made dishes or adding them to meals would be a great way to do that. Okay, let's dive into the meat section here so you can vision yourself in the store. And we're going from produce now to the meat. With our meats, a few points to highlight here before we go into a comparison. Deli meats are scary for a lot of people, but I would say if depending on the brand that we purchase, they can be a great source of nutrients. They're portable, they're easy, and they're packed with protein. It's the fillers and additives that can be added to them sometimes in the packaged items, not necessarily the ones that you would get from the deli that are in a Ziploc bag or a bag of sorts. It's mainly the ones that are kind of on the back wall of the stores that might be packaged or shelf stable or refrigerator stable for 30 plus days. You're going to probably have more additives or ingredients in those compared to the fresh deli meat that they would slice for you. So certainly keeping that in mind for someone whose time is an issue, convenience is an issue, an excellent way to add protein. Your whole pieces of poultry are always going to be a little bit cheaper than the things that are skinless already or pre-marinated or boneless. I get this question a lot too. Frozen seafood, just as healthy as fresh. Keep in mind, we don't live near Alaska, and so the fish that's here is usually flown in and frozen prior. So the frozen is just as healthy as fresh. Beans and lentils are an excellent way to add protein, can be very economical and cost friendly, and usually somewhat kid friendly too. And even our canned meat options are great. As far as what meat choices we choose, I would always encourage to choose anything with loin in the name. So sirloin, tenderloin, pork tenderloin, or strip loin. Those are all leaner choices of meat. So you're going to get a better protein value for your dollar than if you would buy something that that doesn't have that loin in the name. Okay, let's look at a question here. What are your thoughts on protein? So this is, I was just doing a lecture yesterday and I talked to my students about the fat of carbs and then the fat of fat. And now we're thinking about protein, and there's a lot on the store shelves about higher protein. So can you overload on protein? What are we thinking here? Myth or fact? Okay, a few myths here. Yes, you are correct. Extra amounts of protein don't offer added benefit. In particular, we absorb about 30 grams of protein at one time, or we can at one meal or snack. So if we go in excess of that at that one time, we're likely converting that just to excess energy. So it's important to space out protein throughout the day, not just eating one big steak at dinner, but trying to have protein in the morning, lunch, dinner, snacks, and such too. So extra amounts of protein can cause damage to the liver and kidneys. Protein has nitrogen in it, which is excreted in our kidneys, and it can cause issues. So we want to be mindful of how much protein we're eating. Certainly, we could argue and say many people don't get enough protein in their diet, and I would agree with you on that. But going in excess, thinking that it's a benefit, might be something that could be harmful for us. So just being mindful of that and trying to be aware of how much we're actually consuming. Okay, and back to our little portion sizes here again. All right, what are your thoughts on this? Ground beef versus ground turkey. What's a better option that we might choose or should choose, or based on these two labels here, what would you choose? and it can be based on taste preference or nutritional value or whatever your thoughts might be. Okay, so I'm seeing a little bit of both. I actually mix them. Okay, good response. They don't have big differences. Both are good. Turkey for nutrition, beef for taste. I like that. And I love the idea of mixing them too. Good thought. So the comparison here is both 93% lean ground beef and 93% ground turkey. And the reason I point that out is because in the store shelf, there is even such thing as 90% lean ground turkey. It's not all, ground turkey is not all just 93.7 or 99% lean. And so I compared that to the same ground beef. Same thing with ground beef. We can have 80% lean ground beef. We could have 90% lean ground beef. So comparing these both together, if you'll look at these in particular, the calories are the same. The calories from fat, or the total fat grams, sorry, are 8 in each. So 8 grams from the beef and 8 grams from the ground turkey. The real difference that lies in here when we think about this is the iron content. So the iron content of beef is much higher. You will see double the amount in beef as you would from ground turkey. And iron helps with tiredness and fatigue and some things people struggle with on a regular basis. So it's not that ground turkey is a bad choice. I just pointed out here that ground beef can be just as lean as ground turkey, and there's a little bit more nutritional value in that iron than our ground turkey would provide. So it's a taste preference. It's a personal preference. Just here again, know why you're buying what you're buying. And if you like the taste of ground beef, there's absolutely nothing wrong with 93% lean ground beef. In fact, you're going to get more iron than you would from ground turkey. So food can taste good and be healthy. All right, let's dive into snack foods. So go ahead and just type in some thoughts here about your favorite snack foods or items or what you turn to for a snack. And if you don't snack, that's okay too. But what are some thoughts on what you snack on? Chips, Pirate's Booty, popcorn. This is what I struggle with. Yes. Big bars, pistachios, popsicles, chips, cucumbers. We tend to turn to these quick and easy foods. Snacks can be healthy though. And I think a lot of times we think they have to be just chips, crackers, cookies. Those simple carbohydrates really can increase our blood sugar, and then we feel hungry again quickly. So my main message here would be try to add protein to our snacks to help with fullness. Protein helps us feel fuller longer, and so there's great ways we can do in that combination. And here's just a list of how we can add the protein to things like our chips or things to our vegetables or fruit to help round that out a little bit more. So good suggestions here. Budget friendly, just to throw that in here too, because we're likely all on a budget. Some great things we could keep in the office or on the go as well with families. Okay, let's move on to grains, pastas, and breads. So let's think about this. What is the difference, or what are some things you see in the difference here on our Sara Lee Classic 100% whole wheat compared to our Sara Lee 45 calories delightful wheat bread? What are some things you notice? Calories, the term 100% whole wheat, whole grain versus processed. Less calories on the right. Certainly, yes, it's listed that as the marketing. One is whole grain. This is where I think a lot of people get confused too. What is whole grain? What is whole wheat? What is wheat? Is it the same thing? Should we be even eating it? I think there's a lot of confusion around this. So if we look at these here, when it says 100% whole wheat, that first grain is going to be a whole grain, okay? The way I'll explain this is there's an umbrella of whole grain, and wheat is a whole grain, brown rice is a whole grain, quinoa is a whole grain. There's many whole grains, okay? If we just had wheat, the one on the right, you can see the ingredients here. That first ingredient is enriched bleached flour, which is white flour, okay? And so there's going to be wheat flour in it, but it's not going to be that first ingredient, and likely it's going to be mixed with other things. So what we want to look for with our grains is that term 100% whole wheat or 100% whole grain. which is going to boost our fiber content and likely a little bit of protein too, because there's a little bit more protein and fiber in those whole grains. So when we're choosing our grains, that 100% is that label we want to look for, and then we can confirm that in the ingredient list. Okay, same thing with our oats or cereals. So with our oatmeal too, questions I get here is steel cut versus rolled oats versus old fashioned versus the middle here, instant. With our instant oats, you can see the ingredients. There's added things to it because it's flavored, but just a regular instant oat packet that's not flavored and no seasonings to it is going to be similar nutritional content to our rolled oats or steel cut oats. The difference in the steel cut versus rolled oats versus our old fashioned versus our instant is really just it's been processed, not in a negative way, but processed the way I'm saying it in a way that makes the cook time a little bit less. So think about the steel cut is then flattened for an old fashioned or a rolled oat. And then that old fashioned oat is chopped up a little bit more for an instant oat to lower the cooking time. So nutritional value, not much difference. You're still going to get fiber and you're still going to get protein from that. So just a tidbit of information to look for. The main message here is look at the ingredients. You're going to see more of that in something that might be flavored or had additives to it. Okay, some simple tips and suggestions on ways to get whole grains in our diet. And here again, these slides will be made available to you. Let's talk about dairy. This is another very confusing area of the store. So what kind of milk or dairy products do you choose or not choose? Skim milk, organic whole milk, soy milk, almond, lots of variety here. Yes, Fairlife oat milk, Greek yogurt. Yes, my favorite. Awesome. So we got some dairy drinkers here. Loving banana milk at the moment. Yes, so let's take a dive into this and understand the difference in these. With our dairy, cow's milk is a good source of protein. I'm going to show you the comparison between whole milk 2% one and skim so you can see what that looks like. And we'll look at milk alternatives here shortly. For budget-friendly purposes, cheeses, I would always suggest buying the block yourself and shredding it. It's going to save a little bit of money, and the cheeses in the package that are shredded already do have what I will call like an anti-caking agent to them to help them not clump. And so that might be something of concern for certain populations. Cottage cheese gets overlooked too. I think Greek yogurt kind of just took its place on the shelf, but it's a great source of protein, and it can be very economical as well. You've mentioned Greek yogurt already, twice the amount of protein than our regular yogurt, so excellent choices here. With our eggs, just a point of contention is your brown eggs are not any healthier than the white eggs. The brown eggs are really just the breed of the hen that lays them, so don't feel discouraged by buying just white eggs. They're just as healthy. The yolk also has choline in it and vitamin D, so unless you have a high risk of heart issues in your family, I would certainly encourage consuming the yolk and the white. The white has the protein, the yolk has those micronutrients in it as well. Okay, here's where I kind of dive into the different types. So I've just compared rice milk, soy milk, and dairy milk. The main difference that you're going to see here is protein content. So our milk alternatives, when I say milk alternatives, that's mostly what I'm alluding to is rice milk, oat milk, almond milk, the nut milks, the banana milks. There's just not much protein in that. So you can see a difference in 8 to 1 grams. Soy milk is a really good alternative to dairy milk if there's allergies or sensitivities, because soy milk has a very comparable amount of protein to dairy milk. So just something to point out there if we're looking in the store shelf. This brings up the point of the whole milk comparison to our fat-free milk. You're going to see everything is very similar across the board, with the exception of fat content. So whole milk has 8 grams of fat in it per serving. Our fat-free certainly has 0, and it goes down as we go from 2 to 1 to 0% fat. But even whole milk, I say only, it only has 8 grams of fat per serving. It's about 4% milk fat. So it's not as maybe high as what most people would assume it to be. The protein levels are all the same across the board. So don't feel bad about buying any one of these is what I'm saying here. Just know it's a fat content difference. They're not adding or doing anything different to the milk other than changing the fat content or lowering the fat content by removing some of that off the top when we go from whole to skim. Okay, and you can see here the fat content changes. All right, let's go into our fat content as we're talking about dairy, but then even maybe moving into the store shelf on our nuts, seeds, and that type of thing. What are your thoughts about low fat items? Is that better than regular? And what are we thinking here? Okay, a few of you are saying myth. Yes, and I would say it depends. We just talked about our low fat dairy, right? Being dairy is a saturated fat, it comes from an animal. So we want to try to limit our saturated fat intake. But just in general, a lot of times our low fat items might not be better than our regular. And I think, Maria, you just mentioned low fat often has more sodium and sugar. So you're right. I'm going to show you an example on the next slide here to illustrate our regular peanut butter versus our reduced fat peanut butter and how that might change. So my message here would be, think about where the fat's coming from, okay? We talked about meats, we talked about dairy. That fat is coming likely from an animal, and animal fat is more saturated fat, which many of us get enough of in our diet. So trying to minimize by choosing leaner choices of meat or choosing that low fat yogurt or dairy would be a good choice. But when we're thinking about our nuts, our seeds, our healthy fats like peanut butter, or maybe some salad dressings made with oil and vinegar, reducing the fat often is going to add more salt and more sugar. And you can see that in this example. The sodium changes from the regular to reduced fat, and so does the sugar. And salt and sugar are two things we know we get enough of in our diet for most Americans. So just be mindful and understanding low fat does not always mean healthier or better. And I just highlight the two here that you can see the sodium certainly increases and the sugar does as well. Yes, Amanda, we have lunch after this food talk, so you can make good choices. Good point. Okay, so diving into fats and oils, just understanding what they do. So we do need them. They help with transporting fat-soluble vitamins. So if we're consuming vitamin D rich foods, but we don't have any sources of fat coming in with that, it's hard to absorb that for our body. And for athletes in particular, or those who are looking at doing more endurance or being more active, we know that research has found that diets lower in fat content can compromise performance. Here's that again. We want to limit the hard fats or more those solid fats. Those are more animal-based fats, and use more of liquid-based fats. So oils, nuts, seeds, nut butters, avocado, all good things that we should be including in our diet. Okay. What about our beverages? This is another area of the store that gets overlooked, or we put it in our cart thinking, oh, I need that and I'd like to have that. Let's talk about this here. And then Monica, we'll come back to your question on seed oils because I think that's a great question. But let's move forward here. And then if we have time for that, I'll certainly ask. What are your thoughts about beverages, caffeine? Can't live without them, need them, too much? I quit drinking soda. I like that. That's a hard thing to do. Yeah, I think certainly with our caffeine, we have those who really have to have it and then struggle. So added sugar is often in these beverages, and you will see this on the food label. So keep that in mind. And I just give this graphic to show that there's more sugar in things than we truly realize or might even want to believe. So using this and keeping this in mind. There is added sugar in a lot of these ingredients, and you might be surprised to find honey. Oh, it's good for me. And yes, it has maybe some health properties, but it's still added sugar. Same as some of our, maple syrups, or say we said just the turbinado sugar, brown sugars. It's still added sugar, and we want to be mindful about how much that we're choosing and consuming that. So healthier alternatives, some of you have mentioned this too, doing more of our sparkling waters, agave or monk fruit. So agave still is somewhat of an added sugar. Monk fruit is listed as not necessarily an added sugar. Monk fruit, it grows on a plant, so it is what we would call more natural. It is a sweetener. It's different than Splenda or Sweet and Low. Those are more, I'll call man-made compared to monk fruit. My caution with that would be is we just don't know enough about it right now. We know that it doesn't impact our blood sugar like sugar does. It's in a lot more things that are labeled as no added sugar, but still taste sweet. I think more research needs to be done on that. I think it's certainly promising, but here too, think about the company that it keeps. What is it in? Do we really need to be drinking 5 Capri Suns a day that has monk fruit in it just because it's less sugar? Or could we choose an alternative like water or maybe a sparkling water that doesn't have that? Um, Same thing with our diet sodas too. I'm more of the drink the real thing, but less of it, just because there are things in a lot of these items that taste sweet but don't have sugar or no added sugar. Um, there's red flags there for me. If it doesn't have sugar in it and it tastes sweet, but it says no added sugar, that's not false advertising. It just means that they're using some sort of alternative to make it sweet. And that could be monk fruit, that could be Splenda based items. And so here again, we just don't have enough research to support and say, yes, those are completely safe to have, without truly knowing that. So trying to have here again the real thing, but having less of it, especially if it has a lot of sweeteners in it. Okay. Just some tips too, if we're needing that caffeine or wanting that energy burst, here's some suggestions of how we can maybe give us that energy that we need instead of trying for those sweetened beverages. Black coffee, fine to choose. Green teas, black teas, those are all great, good health benefits. Here again, it's what we add to it that can impact it. Same thing here too, trying to get through the day. I would always lean on more of our fruits, our vegetables, our grains. For those chocolate fans, your dark chocolate can have a little bit of magnesium and vitamin E in it. So great things that we could certainly include. All right, so let's go through vitamins and minerals. So I get a lot of questions here and we'll breeze through this, but here again, I'm happy to answer further questions. There really is not an extra need for supplement unless you're truly deficient in a certain vitamin or mineral. They do not provide extra energy and they're not regulated like food. Okay. So I'm always a food first recommender. For inflammation, there's great things that we could include in our food. For protein, instead of choosing powders and such, there's great foods that we could choose here again. However, if you do choose to supplement, which some people still do, and that is okay, I would suggest that we choose supplements that have one of these labels on them because these are more or less a third party that regulates that supplement to make sure what's in it is truly what they're saying is in it. So NSF is a good one to choose. It's a label or a stamp that's on certain supplements that means they've done further testing to make sure what's in it is truly in it. Informed choice is another one. You'll see these here as well. So like our athletes in particular in many sports have to, if they're going to choose something, it has to have NSF label on it to ensure that they're getting what's truly in there. So not that we can't supplement, just here again, know what we're buying and why we're buying it, to ensure that we're being as healthy as we can. Okay. So just kind of in conclusion, and I know I'm running a little short on time, but I want to open it up for questions. Try to make a lifestyle shift, one that works for you and certainly isn't a quick fix. So some of these small changes, hopefully you can incorporate or just be a better consumer when we shop in the store to make those better choices. I'll reemphasize what we talked about at the very beginning: whole grains, lean meats, fruits, vegetables, and dairy, and healthy fats would be great to add into there. I always use the 80-20 rule. Eat well 80% of the time, allow 20% for the splurge or not the best food occasionally, and you're still going to come out okay and on top, and you'll still enjoy life. If we're intuitive with our eating and we try to eat when we're hungry and stop when we're full, that's easier said than done, but try to listen to our body and be more mindful. That can be another great way that we can balance health. Exercise should also be incorporated. I think that's something people struggle with too, is just the time in doing that or having busy families. Even if it's walking during your lunch break or trying to find that way to get movement in can be important. Balance and variety, try not to eat the same thing every day. And remember, this is fueling your body. Your body is the only one you get. And so trying to put those things in and those nutrients in that really make an impactful difference on you and your health and others is certainly what we want to focus on. Okay, I have about 5 minutes for questions. Sorry, that was running through that a little bit, but let me go back to Monica. I think you mentioned about seed oils, and then there was something about artificial sweeteners. So let me start with seed oils, and then we'll do artificial sweeteners, and then feel free to type in the chat. Seed oils is big in the media right now, and seed oils, for those of you who don't know, could be something like canola oil or some of our vegetable-based oils. And I'm not sure why they're getting the bad reputation, but they have a lot of good health benefits, okay? And so seed oils are usually more of our monounsaturated fatty acids, which help with inflammation and can help overall. So I do not think that they're bad. There's not enough research for me to say that to support that they are unhealthy to be choosing. In fact, our unsaturated fats are better to choose than our saturated fats. So saturated meaning solid at room temperature, fat around steak, coconut oil is a solid type saturated fat. Those things we know and prove that there is negative health effects with more of our saturated fats. So our seed oils are not unhealthy to choose. There's a lot of good benefits in them. I think it was more or less just kind of a media craze and it's just taken off from there, but there's just not enough to support, in my mind, of lowering or impacting inflammation. So hopefully that was helpful. Thanks, Monica. The artificial sweeteners. So here again with artificial sweeteners, there's just not enough research to support or say one way or the other that yes, they're harming us or they're impacting us one way or the other. I would always say have the real thing, less of it, or try to minimize the sugar content of our foods. We're grasping at different ways that we can make things still taste really sweet, but not be bad for us. And this is where I would challenge you to look at the ingredient list. If you judge the food by the company it keeps, and there's a lot of ingredients in there we can't pronounce or we don't understand, it's probably time to choose something else. And if we can choose things that have basic ingredients that maybe have sugar in it, but minimal amounts, or we mix the two together. So an example would be, I love Frosted Flakes, but can I mix them with plain corn flakes that have no sugar in them? And now I've lowered my sugar content, but I still feel good about the choice that I have and I like the taste. If we need to choose an artificial sweetener, and certain there's populations that do, I think of diabetics or someone who really has tight control on the sugar content and needs a fun treat, I would steer more towards the monk fruits and the things that are natural. Here again, they're very new, so it's still not enough out there to say yes, have them all the time. But if we do need to choose one, personally, I would choose more of that more natural based one than things that are man-made. So hopefully that was helpful there. Any foods that we should absolutely stay away from? Well, as a registered dietitian, I would say all foods in moderation, and that is what I stick by. I have two little boys at home and a family, so there are still Oreos in the pantry and Cheez-Its and items that maybe not would be the healthiest on anyone's radar. But here again, it's moderation and it's minimal of that. So in my previous work, I worked with a lot of patients with eating issues, binge eating, overeating, eating disorders. And what I found a lot of times is those who put extreme restrictions on their eating, or I can't ever have that food. When it's off limits, we tend to then overeat on it or indulge in other ways at some point. And so I wouldn't say any food is off limit. It's just trying to think about the bigger picture. If I look at that food and I look at the ingredients and the nutrition facts panel, is it a pretty good choice? Is it lower in those things I need it to be low in? Are the ingredients things I can pronounce and understand and should be consuming? And those are the things we should be eating 80% of the time. I struggle with eating healthy snacks as vegetarian. Besides fruits and nuts, what else can I eat? That's a great question here too. So I would certainly include some protein-based foods, and this might be, if you are including dairy, so this could be our cheeses or cottage cheese or our yogurts, certainly beans, lentils, even our grains like quinoa. That's a whole grain, but it's also a complete protein. So we might make a quinoa type salad and add veggies to that. So it's ways that we can think a little bit more outside the package rather and incorporating protein into those vegetarian based snacks to help with that. So great question. Other questions? Did I miss any throughout, Courtney or team? Did I miss any as we were going through?
I saw one about the wellness shots or wellness juices that are sold near the produce. Do they really help?
Okay. Yes. So when we think about wellness shots or juices or some of these items, I'll probably go out on a limb here and say some of it can just be more marketing. Okay. And so if we anticipate that taking that one time a week or at one point it's going to help to improve our health, we probably need to look at the bigger picture and go, okay, what else am I doing in response to this? So if it's just a little bit of a boost and overall I eat pretty healthy, probably no big deal. But we need to look at our whole picture. What are we eating on a weekly basis? Are we eating out regularly and the choices there are poor? Are we cooking at home? Are we getting more grab and go? Are we skipping meals and using this kind of juice or replacement as part of that? I would challenge us to do a little bit more reflection and self thinking on what are my overall habits looking like. So here again, the things on the shelf are not bad, or they're not items that I would say never choose. But let's read the ingredients, let's look at the label, and then think about the bigger picture. How am I using this item or this product? And is that the best way to use it, or should I be changing other habits too?
Awesome. I think that was everything that I saw in the chat. And I just want to thank you so much for your time, your energy, and especially your knowledge. I always learn something from you. And I just greatly appreciate that because I think that our attendees did as well. So if y'all have any questions, comments, concerns, you can send those over to the Living Well team. We can relay those over to Megan. If you have any questions, send them over. Otherwise, go enjoy your lunch break, which is perfect timing after this session. And we will see you back if you're continuing with us for today's wellness fair. We will see you back at 12:15 for our values-based decision-making workshop with Bailey Linson. Thank you so much, Megan. We really appreciate you.
You all have a great day.